Okay, let's get into fiction books because most of what I do is nonfiction. That's usually what I read. But yeah, I read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe as a kid. This is actually the one that I had when I was a kid, and you can get these stories anywhere. Like there's all kinds of different compilations. This is one that I had more recently. Yeah, it was like $7, and this is big collection of a lot of his stories. And I even had this one. This is an audio cassette collection. So these are audio cassettes with performed by Vincent Price and Basil Rathbone. Really awesome to hear their voices. And that's the thing with Poe. I think it's just they're great stories to retell and to interpret. They've made lots of movies based on Edgar Allan Poe, especially because all his work is in the public domain. So anybody can make a movie based on a Poe story. And that's why you see so many of them. They've never made one, I think, that perfectly is a perfect adaptation. But that's the thing, is you can't really... there's no definitive way to adapt his work. I think his work is always open to interpretation. Like in Mask of the Red Death, it's a interesting story, but it's just... You think about it and you're like, well, what does it really mean? The Red Death comes into the party at the end and there's like all these different colored rooms, and death goes through all the rooms, and some people have said it's the colored rooms are supposed to represent all the different stages of life. So you hear different takes on the whole thing, and that's what I think is great about the stories, is that there's so many ways to interpret them. So reading them is only the first step, because and there's so the vocabulary in his stories actually are so how do I say, just outdated, like, because these are pretty old stories, so it's like a lot of times reading them, it might not translate that well to newer generations, but we have so many different retellings of it, and that's what Poe is all about to me, is the retelling. So obviously I'm going with horror fiction. That's probably most I have to talk about is Poe, really, because that's where I got my start, I guess. Or there's the first well-known author that I used to read, as a kid. But then there's H.P. Lovecraft, and Lovecraft is kind of like the other Poe in a way. But to this day, I'm still reading more of Lovecraft that I've never, read before, and I always notice more and more influences, like more references that I'll know where something came from, like in the Batman universe. You've heard of Arkham. Arkham came from Lovecraft. So a lot of stuff like that. Then of course there's Stephen King. Stephen King's one of the most popular horror authors there ever was. But I remember as a kid, I was afraid to read him, or I don't know what it was. I think there's all the movies. I remember when It was on TV, and it was like in 2 parts, and I remember that's when I first found out who Stephen King was, and then I just started watching his movies. So I always felt like I wish I spent more time reading the books instead of watching the movies, because most Stephen King movie adaptations are not very good. Now, as far as books go that I read as a kid, I still have all my Michael Crichton books, well, most of them. Jurassic Park came out in 1993. I think I was 12 going on 13 at that time, and I had to read the book. I remember right after I read this, I was hooked, and I wanted to read all of his books. So I actually did. I read every book that he had at that time, except for, I think, Rising Sun was one that I didn't finish. That was the only one that I didn't read all the way, because it wasn't like science fiction, so I guess it didn't intrigue me enough. But what was the other one that I didn't? Oh, The Great Train Robbery. Yeah, I remember that one. I finished that one, but I remember not really liking that one much. I don't even have all of them still, but I remember one that I liked a lot was The Terminal Man. A little bit like a modern day Frankenstein. Eaters of the Dead was one that I really liked. And then Sphere, I guess this one was my favorite book I read at that time. I loved it. I read this twice. I should read it again sometime and figure out what it is that fascinated me so much about it. I think I just am really interested in deep sea exploration. I just find the idea frightening of going down into the depths of the unknown. And this is all about finding a alien spaceship, or they think it's an alien spaceship up the bottom of the ocean. I just remember that it's like as soon as you start reading it, it's like you can't stop because it's so it's just so suspenseful. Yeah, so I like that one better than Jurassic Park and everything, really. I mean, Sphere was my favorite. They made a movie off of it, but I don't think the movie did too well. I don't remember, really. Then, of course, I gotta mention, because we're on the horror topic, is, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I read this as a kid, and I remember this one wasn't my favorite just because of the way it's written. I love the ideas in it, but I just didn't like the vocabulary. It has a lot of that old-time kind of, like, words like thee, thy, thus, and thou, and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm reading this, I'm like, 13 years old or something. There's Dracula, of course. Dracula is written a lot more interesting, I think, just because it's in all these different perspectives. You have different characters. It's all journals and diaries and stuff. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, very, very different from the movies. War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells. And then on, the H.G. Wells topic, we have The Invisible Man. And actually, The Invisible Man, I think, is my favorite of all these. Of all the ones that became famous monster movies, The Invisible Man is a really easy read. You just breeze right through it. You can definitely see it going on in your head as a movie. So it was ripe material for what they did in the film. Bela Lugosi and the House of Doom. And I have not read this yet, but I've read the first chapter so far. It's on the set of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and some kind of murder mystery happens. I've read the first chapter, and it starts off like Memento, but with Bela Lugosi. So it starts off, and he's in bed, and he wakes up, and he doesn't know what happened, and then there's all this strange stuff around the room, and he's trying to piece together what he did. It's a lot like The Hangover. So far, it's pretty funny.